so happy to be here this morning with two of my colleagues, Chela Mitchell, who is the founder of Chela Mitchell Advisory, which is an advisory firm, which she will speak about in a minute, and Emma Gray, who is the founder of her eponymous gallery in Los Angeles. So I would love for each of you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your career. So Chela, first.
I'm Chela Mitchell, and thank you so much for that introduction. I'm happy to be here with everyone. Yes, I am the founder of Chela Mitchell Art Advisory. We're celebrating 4 years this year. And I'm also the founder of Chela Mitchell Gallery, which is showing here at NADA with the solo presentation of works by Nate Palmer. And I'm based in Washington, D.C., and we were the first gallery from Washington, D.C. to ever show at NADA. So I love the NADA family. Happy to be here.
Hi. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Emma. I have a gallery in Santa Monica called Emma Gray HQ, also known as Five Car Garage. I've been around for a long time. I've worked in the art world in many capacities. I've been an editor at Art Review. I wrote a column for ArtNet. I have advised, I still advise. I support a lot of women artists. I have 2 women on my stand right now, one from New Mexico, one from Britain and Cameroon. And yeah, I definitely have a unique approach to looking after artists and collecting. So I'm looking forward to questions today. Thank you.
Fantastic. So I think I want to structure this talk in a way where people can walk away with a tangible action item, and also to address what I've heard from a lot of people in maybe a sort of whispered tones because they are embarrassed by their lack of knowledge of the art world. And I think that's nothing to be ashamed of. We all start somewhere. So I wanted to talk about 3 things that I think that keep people from collecting art and starting to collect art. And that is, 1, how do I know what is good? How do I define my taste? How do I make sure that I'm not randomly buying and then end up with sort of a hodgepodge on my walls? The second is prices and price transparency and budgeting, and how a lot of times it's very difficult to figure out what it is you're paying for, whether you're paying the right price, and really to get a price at all. And then finally, the idea of there being gatekeepers in the art world, that you have to go through somebody to buy art. It's not like clicking a button on Amazon. It's a much more relationships-based business. So I would love for those things to be addressed. Talk about, we're so lucky to have sort of both sides, someone advising as well as someone who is doing the selling. So if you'd like to start with just what you tell new clients, what you tell, what you expect from people who come into the gallery, and how to sort of, codes of conduct, I guess.
My main advice is to start, see as much as you can, and go to museums and stand in front of very famous paintings and understand what they're about. I went to art school, so I spent a long time learning from great masters. You can start with museums, but you also can start at an art fair. And it's useful sometimes to have a gatekeeper. I've been a gatekeeper to a number of collectors, and I know a number of young collectors who use artists, and they pay them a little bit. And they say, why is this good? What's the color like? And I was just saying to these guys, I tell a lot of collectors to look at paintings and then sit for a minute and how does it make you feel? Not just how does it look, how do you feel when you're standing in front of it? Because if you know that, you might want to live at home with it. And I think if an advisor sounds very expensive for you, find an artist, give them a bit of money. I know plenty of people that do it, and it's a nice way of supporting artists as well. And don't be afraid to ask any questions of dealers. I'm extremely available for that kind of conversation, and that's how I've built really good supportive relationships over time. I also have a rule of thumb, which is you can't really make a big mistake under $10,000, maybe $5,000. And if you love the work, it's not a mistake. The mistakes I've made sometimes have been overpaying for things, but I love my mistakes, and I live proudly with them. So that's a start.
As far as advisory goes, I always try to, I think it's good to have an advisor, number one. If you can have an advisor, if you have the budget, I would say do that, because they can kind of guide you on what the best artworks are within your price point, your budget. And they also have built relationships with galleries and artist studios. And so they can be that middle person that an artist can say, well, you know, who is this collector? And you can kind of vouch for them and say, this is Hall, and she's wonderful, and she won't resell your work, you know, within 5 years, which is very important to artists. So that would be my first advice. If you have the means, get an advisor. It will save you a lot of time and a lot of money. And give you access, you know, to pieces that you know, wouldn't normally be able to get, especially for collectors of color who I work a lot with. There are barriers to entry in the art world for everyone, white, black, brown, but there are significant barriers for collectors of color. You know, they're left out of the conversation a lot, and I'm a huge advocate for them, and so I work with them no matter what the budget, and, you know, kind of help and introduce them. Also, don't be afraid to DM artists. They're not gonna all respond. Yeah, they might think you're weird, but you would be surprised. Some of them will respond to you and speak to you, and maybe you can set up a studio visit. I also advise reading art books, coffee table books from artists. That's a great start to kind of train your eye and kind of learn about your practice. And then, like Emma mentioned, to piggyback off of what you said, when you step into a room at a gallery or a museum, what are you drawn to? You know, without second guessing, what are you drawn to and why? And then if you document that, you'll notice over time that you're kind of drawn to works that have similar aesthetics or color palette or themes. So that would
No, I totally agree with that. I often, you know, there are these sort of little tricks here and there, but I say, you know, go to the museum gift shop, buy the postcards of the work that you liked, create sort of a mini collection almost, and there's actually a lot of precedent for that sort of mini making. You know, Marcel Duchamp made small works of, you know, his. You know, Zarina did the same thing, who's was a fantastic printmaker. So if you can collect in whatever way the great masterpieces of the museums you've gone to, then you have a much better sense looking at the sort of arc of what you're interested in. And if it looks like everything is abstract and you know, earth tones, then you understand your taste. And so much, I think, is about trusting that part of yourself, because you can't really convince yourself to love something that you don't innately love.
And I want to say, make it fun. I had a great aunt who was a collector in England. She was collected like Hockney and stuff. She would take me to the National Gallery. We'd have a glass of wine when I was 17. We'd charge around Renaissance paintings, and she would sort of let me kind of roller skate through the museum, only stopping in front of things that I liked. And she gave me permission to just enjoy what I liked and move along from things that I didn't. And so make sure it's fun. It's not work, it's fun. Just approach it like that.
There's so much, and I think so much of the intimidation of the art world is that we expect, we think we're expected to know things, to have a degree in art history, to be able to name drop and say, you know, immediately identify the influences of certain artists. And you know, it really doesn't have to be that way. You know, you don't have to love the 10 artists that art history says you should love. In fact, if you hone your own tastes and have a niche, then it gets easier for everyone involved. You will start to be someone that everyone knows collects 18th century English hunting prints, and then people will reach out to you with those items that are available as whether they're advisors or gallerists, and then the whole process becomes a lot smoother. So don't be afraid to be niche.
Yeah, for sure, because sometimes you'll research your favorite artist and then you'll learn about the artists that inspired them. So for example, I love Barclay Hendricks, and I learned that he was inspired by Velázquez, an old master, and then you research Velázquez, and then you see the properties or the characteristics of Velázquez that he put into his work. So you don't have to worry about, like Hall said, having an art history major. It'll just kind of flow, and you'll just kind of learn bit by bit. I did not have an art history major. I did not go to art school, so I'm sitting here, and so that's proof that you can do it. Don't be intimidated.
And I would love to just talk also about the sort of, I know you advise a lot of millennial collectors, and I wonder if you're starting to see a different pattern of collecting and a different way of learning these things, with tools like Instagram and, a million and one other ways that the art world is accessible. Do you find that people are collecting in different ways?
Yeah. Millennials have artists as friends, and so they understand collecting in a different way. It's less about status and more about support or social issues. So for instance, someone like me, I try my best to not shop or give my business to, brands or businesses that don't align with who I am, and I think millennials are very much that. And so, if you're walking into a gallery and no one says hello to you, or you're walking in a booth and no one acknowledges you, millennials more often than not will walk away and find someone who does, give them the attention that they need. And I think that's why we're so powerful in that sense. We have this agency. And so to answer your question, millennials understand the support, and they understand where their money really goes to. And they're fun, and they're flexible, and they love conceptual art, which I think is great. And they're also open to different mediums, where I feel like the old vanguard is just into paintings and oil. You'll see millennials are just into, like, once again, conceptual pieces, sculpture, photography, video, NFTs, which are cough, cough, but they're open, and I think that's going to be fun. I think millennials were 32% of all art sales last year, so we're coming for you. So make sure you make space for us, okay?
Yeah, I am getting there with the NFTs.
We're trying. We're all slowly getting.
Regards millennials, I just pretty much treat everyone the same way in the gallery. I'm a mother of teenagers. I'm grounded, and I try and treat everybody that comes in the same way. And we're not saving lives. We're not doctors. We're not dentists. we're art dealers, and so I just keep it like that and try and be available for all questions and make it approachable.
So let's talk about that. That initial, you walk through the doors of a gallery, you've never bought anything in your life, but you're really intrigued by the artist that is on the walls. But you have no idea. It could be something worth or selling for $1,000. It could be $100,000. I mean, the ways that, the headlines that happen in the art world, it could be $1 million. You really don't know if you're brand new to it. How do I determine whether or not this is an artist that is accessible to me, that is interesting to me, that is something that could really work with what I'm trying to do as a new collector?
That's a good question. You don't know, and so a word of advice that I'll give is just to not be afraid to ask. if you step up in pace for the first time, or David Zwerner, and you're like, how much is this? And they're like, 100K, that's fine, you know, just move on. You know, don't be afraid to ask questions, even though it can be intimidating, but it's okay. Definitely start off with smaller galleries if you can, medium to small galleries. They're more community oriented and just happy to answer, just happy to have the business, you know? I'm very happy to answer questions and talk to people all the time. I think I was talking nonstop all day yesterday, and I love it. I feel honored to have people curious enough to want to come to my booth, and I'm grateful that people even want to visit. So, you know, you might be thinking, oh my God, this is a crazy question, but the dealer is really just happy to have you there. So just ask, you know. I don't think there's no such thing as, you know, a stupid question. Just put yourself out there a bit.
Yeah, no, I think what I often say is, especially at the smaller galleries, you know, we get into the art world because we love it. It's not an easy business. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's something that is, you know, it's a passion that, you know, is what drives us more than anything. And of course, there's, you know, a lot of people who are successful in the art world, but at the core, you know, everyone's sort of a bit of an art nerd. They love to talk about what they do all day because they do it out of something, you know, very deeply seated. So if you can keep that in mind and realize that the person you're talking to is just sort of wants to geek out with you, then it's a lot less intimidating.
And I would say set a budget, which was an annoying thing to, like, but I would say, you know, maybe you want to buy your first thing for under $3,000 and find the galleries, maybe that are going to sell a painting for under $3,000. But you could start with a work on paper, start like that, give yourself a budget, and, you know, down the line, it's quite nice to define deeper, like, do you want to support somebody who has a practice? Do you want to support a woman artist? Or do you want to support digital work? You don't have to do that at the beginning, but it's quite good to set some boundaries to begin so that you don't get lost.
I love that advice.
And let's talk about, because it's something that's close to my heart, women, and what you were saying, Chela, earlier about millennials having more of a, you know, maybe a social perspective, an interest in buying work that is going to change the world, that they, you know, change the world to be something that they want to live in. So women, artists of color, do you see those trends happening? Do you see an uptick in that sort of interest, or is it something that is in headlines but isn't changing in a significant way?
You know, we've been traditionally left out of so many conversations, and I think what's beautiful now, what I'm experiencing is we've kind of created, we weren't accepted in certain spaces in the art world, and we created our own spaces and tables and rooms. And it's just beautiful to watch all of my fellow colleagues of color just kind of rising up and hosting their gallery dinners, and some of them are at multiple fairs, which this just wasn't happening 20 years ago at this scale. And I'm so proud of, you know, all of us who, despite the circumstances or the challenges, just decided to do things anyway. And you know, it's my wish that, you know, and I don't think it's a trend. I do want to say that I don't think it's a trend. I think we're kind of here to stay. You know, it's so important to have, whiteness is the default in this country. When you open up a magazine and you look at an advertisement, that's just what you're going to see, and it's so ingrained in our personality. And Black is my default, you know, that's what I see, that's what I grew up seeing. So to see, even in my booth, to see my city reflected back to me, to take my daughter, I also have a teenage daughter, she's 13, God bless me, to take my daughter to see Simone Vetlet at the High Line and to see the lips and the nose and the features, you know, of my people like reflected to me in that way, it feels great. And I think it's going to keep happening because it feels good. And it's our time. And I want to see women to the front. I want to see artists of color to the front. I want to see disabled artists to the front. I want to see trans artists to the front. And so I think in the next 20 years, everyone's going to have a seat. What that looks like, we might not know, but that's why platforms like NADA are so great, because they have given us a chance. And I'm so grateful, and I love this fair so much. I don't even know if I could ever participate in, you know, any other fairs in the U.S. because they've been so good to us, and they see us, you know? So yeah, I hope that answered the question. I think I went off on a tangent a little bit, but.
No, we want tangents. That's where all the good stuff is.
I agree, and thank you, Nada. I agree. A friend of mine made a parallel between the absence of women in politics. She's doing an organization. She's a very well-known contemporary artist. The absence of women in politics to the absence of women in museums. And I believe that we need many more women artists of every kind in more institutions, in more galleries, in the same way that I would like to see a lot more women leaders running the world. And I just feel like little moves like this, supporting women artists, women dealers, are kind of part of that process. So I'm deeply behind it.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the sort of core philosophies of my organization, Less Than Half, is that, you know, art is something that has been created by human beings across time and place, geography, age. You know, art is this innate human instinct. You know, the fact that it happened 20,000 years ago in, you know, cave drawings, all the way up till today, children, old people, any stripe, any walk of life, is a real indication of art being something that is just part of our DNA. But when we go to the places that legitimize certain creators, certain makers, certain painters, and other artists, we only see a certain demographic of, you know, white men. And to me, that is making this argument that only white men are human beings because they're the only ones making great art. This thing that transcends, this thing that makes us, you know, human beings. And I just see a direct parallel between that and the ability to oppress certain groups of people, the ability to take away their rights, the ability to see them as something less than human. You know, they're not capable of making great art. They're not capable of flourishing as human beings. Therefore, they're not of a level that needs the respect. And that is something that I think is hopefully rapidly changing, not as fast as I'd like. But I think there's a direct parallel. And, you know, when we do get, you know, artists who look different than what we normally see, we're going to have to address their humanity as well.
Right.
That's the power of art. I think we're all doing that here and now. And, you know, I can have a conversation with you and I can say, hey, this isn't right what you're doing. But the power of art is I can present that to you and I can spark the conversation in a different way, where it's felt different. Some people are audio, some people are visual people. And if you're a visual person, the impact of art in that way can be incredible, and it can really change how you perceive the world.
Absolutely.
I was going to add to that. I have a side hustle in meditation, and I work with a lot of artists who are interested in things like that. And I think women tend to be very community-minded. And this is something I want to see more of, like globally, not just in the art world, across the world. So that's another core kind of belief of why we need more women artists in museums, galleries, everywhere.
I think that relates to something that you and I were talking about before, Emma, about how being a collector is not the only way to, be involved in the art world, in supporting artists, being, maybe sort of an old-fashioned term, but the term patron can mean a lot of things, and it doesn't have to be sort of a financial interest in an artist. And that, I think, is a great sort of runway to maybe eventually becoming a collector, is becoming a patron of sorts, a person who is interested in advancing the career of an artist, whether that's referring them to other collectors who do have a collecting sort of practice, or connecting them to people who can give them opportunities, jobs, commissions, grants, that sort of thing. It's a much, once you define that role of collector or patron more widely, I think that you can become much more empowered as a participant.
And I think you'll also further non-conventional forms of art with patronage, like performance art. They need patrons. You can't hang a performance artist piece on your wall. So I think, I hope to see more patrons, more millennial patrons coming out and kind of supporting, these artists who can't make money in the same way as artists who make tangible art that you can feel and touch. That's my wish.
Right, and I think there are a lot of women artists who have what I would like to call a practice, and that comes over maybe 80 years of life. And I have a bunch of women artists who have a couple of patrons who step in every now and then and buy something like a video, a performance, something unwieldy and difficult, and it will pay a year of rent for that artist. And sometimes it's non-tangible, not even fungible. And those are some of the absolutely best collectors there are. And it's great. Sometimes the collector doesn't even know they're saving the artist's life, but they are. And if you can go down that road and be more of a philanthropist, or even employ an artist, get them to do archiving, or I don't know. There are many, many ways that you can support a practice. And at art school, my teachers told me to look at an artist's life through the lens of 100 years. This is something that's going to grow over time. The stuff that just comes out of thin air and goes in 5 years, we're not talking about that. We're talking like a whole lifetime of art.
Yeah, Chela, I would love to hear you talk about that when a client comes to you, if they do, and says, I've heard so much about this artist. They're all over my Instagram. I want one. But maybe it's something that sort of feels hot and is going to sort of go, when a client is more interested in a trend and less interested in the long term, how do you handle that? What's your advice?
I'm so brutally honest. I think that's why my collectors like working with me. I have a collector family in Minnesota, and they're like, you're just a straight shooter. Because, I don't want to waste anyone's time, and I want them to get the pieces that they like, but I always give different perspectives, and I always want to know the intention behind buying the work. You don't want to buy something just because it's hot. You have to live with it every day. And the work that I live with, I just love seeing. Every day I just love seeing it. So I don't have a problem. I don't know how you could be an advisor and just not be honest. I also have to advise collectors on when they're not making good purchases. So for example, if you're buying an edition of 10 work, a work that's an edition of 10 and it's $8,000, I wouldn't think that that's a good choice, because for $8,000 you can get an original work that's just for you, So kind of giving them that advice. And and they appreciate it. And when I give them the information, it's not for me to tell them what to do. I think a lot of people think advisors tell their clients what to buy. I kind of shy away from that. I kind of present to them PDFs of work from themes that I heard them discuss, or from, you know, a piece of information that they gave to me, and they choose their own works. And I fully support that. And, you know, art advisors shouldn't be telling you what to buy. It shouldn't have to do with the market. It should do with the theme of your collection, things that align with you, things that you want to see every day. But anyway, I'm honest. I tell the collectors, and I let them make their own decisions based off of the information that I presented to them. And I hope they make a right choice. If I really think they're going down the wrong path, I will intervene, but I haven't had to do that more than once. So I love my collectors. If they're watching this, hi guys. I love you so much. They're the sweetest, kindest people, and they really care about supporting artists. I have another client. They were online and they were following this artist, and they saw the artist needed money, and they were like, can we buy a work from her like right now? And I was just like, these are the kind of people that I want to work with. I don't work with flippers. I don't work with people who come to me with like these CVS receipts of blue chip artists that they want to collect. Like, I don't do that. I could tell a flipper from a mile away. But yeah, just being honest and open. If you want to be an advisor and you have trouble with being honest and open, I think it could still be a job for you, but just work on advocating for yourself and just speaking that truth.
Right. I would second that, and I would say kind of know what your values are. And I would say my collectors now, I have a group more or less buy from every show. We have shared values. And took me quite a long time as an adult to actually write down and figure out what my values are. But if you can figure them out, you'll find that you're drawn to people that have the same values as you, and you'll make good purchases and good decisions. But yeah, I'm very lucky to have collectors. They know exactly what they're getting with me, and it's a really good exchange. I'm very grateful.
Emma, I feel like you're honest.
I really am. I think having teenagers and being a single parent, etc., does that.
So we were talking about a lot about the sort of long game with artists, but I think there's also a long game, sort of a relationship long game with, maybe that's sort of the wrong, cynical way of putting it, growing and fostering relationships with gallerists as well is a very important sort of facet of becoming a collector, and that can be a very, you know, nothing needs to be rushed in that relationship. You can take your time and build to a point where you're buying from every show. That doesn't happen overnight. That's not expected of someone who walks through the door. So I think I'm always interested in diffusing sort of anxiety when it comes to collecting. The idea that you could be a person who's buying something from every show maybe sounds intimidating to a new collector, but it's something that is built over time, and trust is built and a relationship is built.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
How do you build trust with your collectors, Hall? Let me ask you some questions.
I think that so much of what I have a deep philosophy, and I think it's very clear what I am, I broadcast what motivates me, and I think it's very clear that, I have a perspective as well, and that I'm not a person that, if you're interested in certain things, if you're interested in the, top 10 blue chip artists, or if you're interested in, male artists, I'm not the person for you. But if you resonate with the things I'm saying, if you're sort of a more, connoisseur-centered collector, you're more interested in looking at the history of art and the sort of trends and obstacles that women artists have faced, and are interested in ways that contemporary artists are grappling with that. I think that that immediately sort of communicates a trust. I think it's what you were saying, Emma. And so you have the same values, and I'm, constantly on Instagram and doing sort of events where I'm making it very clear what those values are. So I think that can't be underestimated. That people are always telling you who they are. You just have to be paying attention.
So what I'm getting from what you're saying, I like very much. You're saying that you're niche and you're not trying to appeal to everyone. And I think that's so important to understand that in the art world. Look at this art fair. There's something here for everybody. And so you don't have to be worried about appealing to everyone's interests. You can kind of just do your own thing. I like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's often, advising women to collect women, might not be, there might not be millions of people who are willing to do that or interested in becoming a woman who's advocating for the work of women, but the people who are I definitely, click with.
A well-known woman artist buys from me occasionally, and she's like, for Christ's sake, hasn't everybody got it that women are the next thing? And she's like, I don't understand. And so yeah, concurring with me.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I find, at least for me personally, and what made me realize that this is what I wanted to do and what I wanted to focus on was that, opening up a book of an artist that I had never heard of, a woman whose entire career was there, who had spent decades thinking about certain problems and engaging in them and developing them, and it was all there on the page. It was all there in, a monograph or that to me was just so exciting. And I was so bored by seeing the same artists again and again and again. And I think you see that these days. I think you see the sort of emotional sort of response to these artists who have been sort of discovered. I sort of don't like that word, sort of pulled out from history, where we get to see the fullness of their careers. And it's exciting because it's new, and who doesn't want new?
At our gallery, we say we amplify the voices of artists because we don't give them a voice. They already have a voice. And so we're just making it a little louder, putting it in corners where, they might not be visible. But you're so right. I love how I fell in love with this fair and, a lot of galleries and institutions that I love is the discovery. I don't come here, and there's some artists that I love that are blue chip, but I wouldn't come here to see them. I can go to any institution all across the world to see them. I come here to discover something new, and I guess it all boils down to what your intention is in the art world. Do you care about artists? Do you care about the market? That's going to kind of influence how people approach what they want to see. And so if you're coming to NADA, then 9 times out of 10, you care about work that is emerging and new and fresh, and that's why I love this audience. And maybe if you're going to another fair that rhymes with Tazzle, then maybe you want to see art that is more market focused. And so even down to fairs, they're niche. You're not going to like every fair. You're not going to like every institution. You're going to find your galleries, your institutions, and fairs that you kind of rock with. But I agree with you, Hall. I love discovery. I love walking into a fair and just saying, oh, my goodness, who am I going to see here that's new? And, and how can I support them? So that's the excitement.
Right, and it's very humbling also to sort of say, like, I don't know what I'm going to see, but I am open to it. And I think that's so key.
I totally agree. I get very excited when I see something I have not seen before, and I've looked at a lot of things. And then I'm like, nobody knows about them. And then we come to NADA. So I got 2 of those at my booth.
I wonder if maybe we should open up to questions. Anything is, anything. We've touched on a whole lot of topics. So anything that we've touched on or something we haven't touched on that you'd love for us to talk about. So,
Please don't be shy. Yes.
Elizabeth.
She said, do you think it's problematic for new collectors, to access pricing? Yes, it is. So you know how the traditional way of sharing your work, you send a price list with no prices, kind of wasting everybody's time. And then if someone says they're interested, then you send another PDF with the prices. And I mean, I kind of, I guess we know why people do that, in case they want to jack the prices up for certain collectors or institutions. Yeah, so as a collector, if you're reaching out to a gallery for the first time and you're asking about a particular artist, ask for the price list. That's how they know you're interested. And I'm not talking about my gallery. We're talking about old school galleries who are still running off the old model. So that's how you would have to do it, because they're not going to send you the prices. They're just going to send you the photos. So that would be my advice to new collectors reaching out. If you want to make sure that the prices that they're giving you are correct, you can look on online databases like David Zorner Platform or Artsy and just kind of see if the work is within that range that you're asking about. That would be my advice. Anyone else?
One of my values is transparency. All my PDFs have prices. I also share the invoices with the artists. I know a lot of dealers don't do that, so I'm sorry if I put everyone in the shit. But I do that. I feel good about that. I don't like, I like clean business. Discounts are complicated when you're working with really emerging artists and very low price. Under $4,000, under $3,000, $1,000. I don't always give a discount. My regular collectors who come back every month always get a discount. Depending on the price, always 10%, maybe more. If collectors buy 2 works, 15 or 20% sometimes, especially if they're very loyal, good clients. You can always ask for a discount. I also think you can ask to pay in payments. I have some clients who buy things over 2 or 3 months. I'm fine with that. The artist is fine with that often. I always ask the artist. We have an agreement, usually always 10%. Anything over, I have a discussion with the artist. Sometimes the bigger the collector, the bigger the client, the institution, they're going to want 20%. Artists are like, what the hell? And I'll say, but it's really good for you to be in their collection. If they're young and they don't have a lot of money, I'll take extra on my side to make sure that they're in that collection. Not always, sometimes, it depends. But yeah, I think sometimes if you're buying a work at like $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, don't always expect to get a discount, but 10% is often. And I think it's different in LA to New York because the rents here are huge. So I do know that 20% is a bit. What do you think?
If you're buying 2 works and you ask for a discount, I'm more likely to give it to you if you're buying it at one time. Once again, I would discuss it with my artist first because I do sell true emerging art, not the emerging art that's $45,000. I sell true emerging art, true emerging prices. I also do feel like it depends on the collector. I think as a white collector, you should not be asking artists of color for a discount. You should be paying in full if you can. If you buy 2 pieces, I might be flexible with you. You have to really, understand that when you're asking for a discount, you're taking from the artist. And what else? people don't really ask me for discounts, believe it or not, and I think that's because our prices are so low. But you would be surprised to know that the people that ask for the most discounts are the wealthiest collectors.
Hello.
Not the everyday working ones. These are the ones who are like heirs to, they ask for the most discounts. And I don't think it's anything wrong, maybe because they collect a lot of art, but, I don't know. I think that's a little complicated. Maybe they should think about that moving forward. But yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with discounts. It just has to make sense for me. And if it doesn't make sense for me, I will vocalize it.
Yeah, that's another thing. It's it's not like going to a used car lot and trying. It's like a matter of pride to get the best deal. It's, I've said this many times. It's a relationship. If you show that you're just sort of a shark and are only interested in the negotiation and the deal, that doesn't leave a great taste in the mouth of the artist or the dealer. So, the art world is a relatively small world. If you have a bad reputation, people will start to know that you have a bad reputation, and that you're not reputable and that you're not interested in the artists. And dealers are there to protect their artists. So always remember that it's about relationships at the end of the day.
Yeah, how you do one thing is how you do everything, including your negotiation, I think.
I like that. I always say that.
Any other questions?
I'm going to repeat what she said. Try my best. Help me out, guys, if I don't get everything. She was talking about the importance of payment plans, which I think is so important to let new collectors know that a lot of collectors do this. I know collectors that have, even top collectors, and they'll have a lot of pieces that they're buying and they do payment plans on them. And the reason why artists like this is because they keep the work until the payments have been completed. So they're not put in harm's way. They're not worried about a collector running off with their piece until the payments are complete. It stays with the artist. And I think we don't talk about payment plans enough. And she was saying that, when she was a young collector, it really gave her the confidence to feel like she could, acquire pieces. So always ask, don't be ashamed. To ask about payment plans. I'm a fan of them. I'm lucky. I don't have a lot of people that do them because our prices are pretty reasonable. But I'm open to it. And, once again, always asking my artists if that's something that they would want to do because they're the center, of everything we do. And if they say no, then no. And if yes, we kind of go along with it.
Yeah, and I think I put it in the invoice. You will pay X on the first of the month. So make sure you make the payment on the first of the month and then the next month. And then it's great. I have lots of curators from museums and writers that like to buy things from some of my artists. And the artists love to have insiders buy their work. So it's a nice way to do payment plan. You just have to get the first check in on time and then you're good to go usually.
And I've even asked for payment plans with artists directly, and they're very happy to do it. And I know even that there's a couple different sort of companies that will, sort of front the money. I think there's one called Art Money that a couple, I don't know, maybe you have opinions on it or maybe, but that there are ways that galleries partner with other companies to help make payment plans more secure and trustworthy if the collector is new.
I don't mind it. Whatever works for the collector and the artist works for me as long as they're happy. I would say please be advised if you're doing a payment plan, sometimes in the contract, if you start missing payments, they'll be able to keep some of the payments that you have initiated. So if you really don't think you'll be able to keep it up, you know, just wait until you can because the artist is already invested and has held the piece for you, they'll be able to, you know, each contract is different. So just keep that in mind. 9 times out of 10, gallerists are so cool and down to earth. If you're having a rough or rocky time, just communicate that. Over communication is great. We're understanding. We know what it's like to not get paid on time or to have, you know, ups and downs. So if you have a payment plan, just be over communicative, basically.
So I actually have a question for you two. What, you know, you mentioned a contract. What other paperwork is it, you know, as a collector, what should I have in my files when I buy a work or after I've bought a work? What certifications, what, you know, legal documents, what not so legal documents should I have to, you know, archive and document my collection?
You want the invoice, the bio, high-res JPEG, and keep it all in a file. Anything else? Certificate of authenticity if it's a video or a sound piece or a performance art piece. Those are the basics.
Yes, my artist is here. She makes the best certificates of authenticity, and I love that they come from her because they're so official. Like, they have the raised signature. She's Celia right there. Raise your hand, Celia. She has them there with her. See, she's so on point. I would also say be prepared now. There's new legislation being passed to prevent money laundering in the U.S. I know I've had a lot of trainings about the U.S. Department of Treasury. So now we're being asked to check the IDs of all the collectors and check their names within a database so we won't get fined. And it's not, I think the UK, if I'm not mistaken, is where these laws were implemented first. They're not completely concrete here, but they've been asking us to do that, and if you don't do it, you'll be fined. So if a gallerist asks you for your ID, like, they're not trying to scam you. This is new protocol from like the past 2 years that will be going all around, and then they also have some new software that galleries will be using just to check it and just make sure that your collector is not on the do not sell list. They have a blackout list of collectors to not sell to. Yeah.
Just in terms of having all the documentation and the high-res JPEGs and everything, I think that part of what you need to remember when you buy a piece of work is that you become a steward of it in some way or another, and that you have a responsibility to it, or to keeping it in its best possible condition, and a responsibility to the artist as well and their legacy. You know, if you know, you've kept a work on paper in direct sunlight for 30 years, that's not going to do much good for the piece of work, and that doesn't do much good for the value of the work if you do end up wanting to sell it, but it also doesn't do a service to the artist and their sort of future market and their future you know, cultural significance. So always remember that you know, buying art is a very different sort of relationship with the piece than buying, say, a pair of shoes or a car or whatever.
Insurance. I forgot about insurance. It's so important to have your work insured. Your rental insurance or homeowner's insurance will cover works of art, but you know, fine art is so expensive. I recommend having a separate insurance. I personally use Chubb, but there are a lot of different fine art insurance companies, and if
say that name again.
Chubb, CHUBB. That's what I use. But I've used other companies as well, and they've all been wonderful. If anybody wants to know or connect with someone, I have an insurance person who's wonderful that I can connect you with. Just send me a DM. But ensuring your work is important. And also, when you buy work, keep in mind that shipping is separate. So if you have a budget of $3,000 and you buy work for $3,000, well, you also have to pay for the shipping. So maybe you want to work this $2,000, so you'll have the funds for that. So just keep that in mind as well. I forgot all about that.
That's huge. Yeah, I have very good relationships with my shippers. And I try and factor that in with new collectors as well. Because they'll buy like a big sculpture painting and it can cost more than the painting itself. So you've got to think about that.
And then just to keep talking about, hidden fees. When you buy at auction, also there's a buyer's premium of usually 20%. So if the hammer price is something that $3,000 is your budget, expect to pay above that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Just to repeat that, also having a record of provenance when you buy a piece, and provenance is the collections that work has been in, but also the exhibitions that the work has been exhibited in. And then, of course, there are all sorts of stipulations that you can put into a contract about where and when if there's an exhibition coming up, the sort of lending terms and that sort of thing. Well, I'm glad we got to a lot of the technical stuff. I'm so sorry we saved it for the very end, but I want to thank you both for being part of this conversation. And yes, it was fabulous, and I hope people learned a lot. I certainly did.
Thank you, Hall, for moderating.
Thank you, Hall and Emma. I enjoyed myself.
And you coming over to your booth.
Yes, I'm coming to everyone's booth. Everyone have a good one.